Hey guys, and welcome to the latest edition of Training with Honour TV. So today I'm delighted to introduce Mr. Mark Wynn, who I'm very fortunate to know relatively well. And I'll pass it over to you and to give the listeners a bit of a brief introduction to who you are and what you do.
Yeah, well, as Chris has said, I'm Mark Wynn. For my daytime work, I run an organisation called Haywood, Middleton and Rochdale Circle, which is a social enterprise for older people aimed at reducing social isolation. In terms of my connection with Chris, it was when I was the chairman of Hornets, and we ran a programme with Chris based at Pure Gym at the time, and that's how I came to know him and obviously followed what he's been up to. When I stood down as chair and when Chris has gone and set his own enterprise and gym up himself.
That's absolutely brilliant. So sort of tell us a bit about your story. So sort of how did your love of rugby league sort of shape your involvement, and sort of like how did you get involved? Did you was it starting with the playing side of it, or was it a family connection that got you into it?
No, I think in old sport, it always goes back to somebody took you. At some point, somebody took you to a game, whether that was to play or watch or whatever. Somebody took you. So most people have never done it off their own back. But it's the classic thing. As a kid, my dad took me along to Hornets, to watch Rochdale Hornets. A lot of the times, it was actually the reserve team we went to watch, and I think that's because it was free. Free for me and a small amount of money for me dad. So it was a cheap way on a Saturday for us to do something.
That's good.
And we used to go and watch Hornets at the old athletic ground, which is now Morrison's. And you have weird memories that you don't really remember the rugby so much. There's that thing of spending time with your dad that's the sort of thing that stays with you a little bit. And genuinely, the only match that I really recollect from then, and we're talking 6 or 7, 8-year-old, that sort of age, was we played Bradford, and Bradford had American-style numbers on the jersey, and I thought it was the best thing ever. And for some reason, that stuck with me. And like I said, from a 6 or 7-year-old kid, I remember us playing, the first team playing Wigan and going to a match, and it seemed like, from watching Hornets, the reserve team, when there was just me, my dad and a few others, to it being really full. And I sort of have vague memories of Hornets reaching what was the John Player Special Trophy in the 70s. And again, because you're a kid, your memories are a bit vague. But what I remember was being stood on the terrace and thinking that the terracing was like a mountain. It seemed so high as a kid. It was that. I got involved. The seed was planted by my dad. He got me along to Hornets, as he did with the rest of the family. We're all sort of rugby league fanatics. But in all these things, you do drift away, and I drifted away from the game. Once I hit my teens, more interested in girls and stuff like that. And it was only in my late teens, so at like 19, that I sort of got back into rugby league when the local village started a team and my brother was playing, and he said, "Oh, come along for a bit of keep fit." And that thing of somebody took you, I went along and just went along to keep fit, and the seed that was inside germinated at that point, because you were back involved, and there was something there that resonated with me.
That sounds really good. But I think the thing with the rugby league is it's so infectious, Mark, isn't it? I mean, it's very much a northern sport. It's different to any other sport, I find, because there's a real community feel. Whether you go and watch a championship game, a Super League game, it's a great sport to sort of be involved in. And I suppose that and I guess when your brother took you along and your dad took you along to the Hornets games, and then you got involved in a playing capacity. What were the biggest motivations to sort of keep you going in and continue playing rugby league? Was it the camaraderie within the teammates, or was it the social skills that you sort of learned from the game? Or
well, I was never good enough to play for Hornets. Let's make that absolutely clear. So I was just playing for the local village team, which was new here, and then in all these things, they had two teams, and like I said, I was just learning the game, and then they went to one team, so I went playing it somewhere else, and eventually sort of found my team at Milnrow and played for them. And what I would say in all things in sport is being part of a team. There is nothing else. There's nothing else like winning with a team. And that's not to say I've never, individual sportsmen, like golfers or cricketers or whichever. Playing in a team, I think, is different. I think as long as you feel part of the team, that is the thing. And you even though you may not be best mates with your teammates at the time, when you bump into them even several years later, that thing of being a former teammate still sticks with you. Yeah. So I think being part of that is one of the things that I think with any sport, and I'm not saying that's unique to rugby league, rugby union, football, netball, rounders, hockey, or anything. Yeah. You be part of a team, and it'll stay with you forever.
I totally agree with that, and I can really, resonate with that massively with the Army, because the thing is, with any form of team you're involved in, you can, like you say, you can go away and not see them for years. You come back and it's almost like yesterday, isn't it? And it's such a good feeling to be part of somebody's life and have had that, positive effect on people's lives, and it's great. So obviously we touched upon your time at Rochdale Hornets. How did the role of chairman how did you get involved in the role of chairman? Because obviously a lot of people will think of a chairman or someone in that sort of a role as being someone they're a millionaire, they're going to put loads of money into the club, they buy £1 million players, and when you were at Hornets, obviously we had the likes of Chris Riley at the time, who was a Challenge Cup winner with Warrington, and a good coach in Alan Kilshaw at the time. How did the role at Hornets come about, and just give us a bit of an insight to your day-to-day role as chairman?
Well, it's a slightly convoluted story. Obviously, I was a fan, and so the early 2000s, so 2005, 2006, I started something called the Rochdale Swarm, which was a Rochdale Hornets supporters team, but it played a non-contact version of rugby league. So it played tag, it also played touch. We had a masters team, so we were playing. We were just a supporters team, and then around 2008, the club has always. It's never been the richest club. In 2008, it basically went bankrupt. So it went into administration at the end of 2008. And yeah, it was looking like there was going to be no more of the club. And then I was the lady who was the CEO at the time, Debbie Troop, she was called. I'd spoken to her, a few times with different things, and she rung me up and just said, the RFL have been on. Is there a supporters group that would be willing to take the club on? And I was a member of what was called the Nest Egg at the time. So I said, well, I'll speak to a chap called Jim Stringer, who was the chairman. And so I said, the RFL want to have a meeting. It was very like, not cloak and dagger, that's not the right word, but it was sort of don't tell anybody type of thing. So we met at the John Milne in what I think would be either December 2008 or January 2009. And they said, would the supporters be willing to take the club on as a supporter-owned club? And if you're a supporter, the choice was yes, you do it, or no, the club closes. So it was pretty much
backed into a corner.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you backed yourself into that particular corner because you loved the club. Yeah. So we said yes. So Jim, who was the chairman of the supporters club, became the de facto chairman of Hornets. The RFL, through one of the sort of advisors, put a management company in to run the club called Sponsor Bank. And they ran the club for a good proportion of the first season, but basically made a real mess of it. Jim, who was getting a lot of trouble at work, from doing work and affecting his work and home life, so he made the decision to stand down. And I was telling a similar story the other day, and how did you become chairman? And it was pretty much, if you remember, there's a film, Carry On Up the Khyber. It's an old Carry On film with Phil Silvers, and they're looking for a volunteer to go and do some daring mission. And they say, somebody step forward. And pretty much it was everybody stepped back, and you sort of left. You sort of left at the front.
No one wants to take responsibility, do they?
It wasn't quite as brutal as that, but it was like, of the group, I think we had Paul Ormrod, who's the club president, who had invested, a substantial amount of money. We needed to show funds, if you will, and he put that money up. He put something like 120 grand up to get the club going.
Oh, wow.
And he was based in London, and he rung me up, says, basically, you run a business, you've got a rugby league background, you're your best position to be the chair. Would you be interested? And again, I felt, I thought I had a lot to offer anyway, but I thought, it's almost what an honour. I was never good enough to play for the club, but to be the club chairman, then I'll definitely take that role on. And then so you take the role, and then you start to sort of get a grip of the situation. And Sponsor Bank had basically spent the 120 grand. The team had gone okay, to be fair. To say we started with an 8-point deduction, but there was a lot of. It wasn't a nice environment, if the truth was told. So we Sponsor Bank sort of said, "Oh, we're not doing it anymore." They left, but they went bankrupt as an organisation. They were.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they went bank. So we had 120. We ended up with 120 grand debt. That's when I became chair. So it was like, oh my goodness, this thing couldn't get much worse. So
they threw you under the bus, Mark, there, didn't they?
Yeah. So the coach, we parted ways with the coaching staff, and so we had to. Basically, that was a clean break with everything, apart from we had this 120 grand hole in the bank account. So it was at that point, it was. You start to realise there's some work to do here.
Yeah.
And so we advertised for a coach. And to be honest, we didn't get a lot of candidates. We got a lot of lads who were coaching amateur teams that are, real low level stuff. Because the brand was tarnished. We'd got, who wants to come to a club that had gone bankrupt? The coach is gone. It didn't look great. In reality, if you took into account the old administration, and then the new, so Jim had stood down. There'd been, say, 5 chairmen in 12 months, something like that. So it didn't look attractive. But one person who did throw the hat in the ring was John Stankovic.
Oh, yeah. So
basically, John turned up, and we interviewed him. And he interviewed really well. He was enthusiastic, and he said basically he wants the job. He's got players lined up who want to come and play for him. But given and I know Stanky actually wrote a biography, and he sort of mentions this, and it was interesting to see his perception of him sat on one side of the table and me on the other.
Yeah.
He said, and I'm thinking to myself, John, you've basically got this job because, one, there isn't any others, but two, you're not a bad candidate. And he said, and in his book, he sort of put something like, I felt like when I went for the interview, I'd got the job already, and it was sort of like they were going to give me a free rein to sort of pick the team that I wanted.
Yeah.
But we'll probably touch on that because that's an important thing why I think we've been successful is I've never interfered with team selection. And a lot of chairmen think they are the coach and they know the tactics of the game.
Yeah.
But in reality, I'm a fan, and I enjoy, and I would say I know rugby league pretty well, but I'm not the coach, and you've got to give the coach the tools to do the job. So I think Stanky was my first real appointment.
Wow, that's quite an insight, and for you to go in there with such, I suppose it's like having a 10-ton weight, Mark, isn't it, on your shoulders to have to overcome, because I guess it's, you know, like I say, the club's brand have been tarnished. I suppose, you know, obviously you've got to build the brand back up. You've got to get the reputation back. What was it like from a fan's perspective? I mean, did you come under quite a lot of like a Q&A, or come under quite a lot of questions from the fans as to the future of the club and so
Yeah,
forth?
and I think that was in doubt. There was there was a lot of acrimony from people involved in the previous regime to the new regime. Because we did make changes, we sort of we had some odd situations that arose, and because the old club had gone bankrupt, we could call ourselves Rochdale Hornets. The organisation could be that, but we couldn't use the name Rochdale Hornets on the badge well, we had to get the shareholders of the previous organisation to vote that we could use the name, and it came back and we weren't allowed to. So for 2 years, we were Hornets Rugby League. But the organisation was Rochdale Hornets. Well, this is an interesting one, because it was all done in a rush, and we used supporters directory. We used to dealing with football clubs.
Yeah.
They were used to a football club being Rochdale Association Football Club.
Yeah.
So when they wrote our name out on the legal document, they wrote it as Rochdale Hornets Rugby Football League Club, rather than Rugby League Football Club.
Oh, yeah.
So there's like this like little anomaly in the name. So yeah, so it was. We had this situation where, like I said, there is some, and you know, I'll be brutally honest. I got anonymous stuff through the post, threats against my business. My wife opened a threat against the business.
Yeah.
You know, anonymously, and that sort of stuck in your throat. But I kept them. I kept them all. So I got over the first 12 months, I got about 12 things through the post.
Gee.
And like I said, I've never really talked about this, but I kept them. And in terms of sometimes, you know, when you're thinking we're struggling a bit here, or I'm struggling a bit, I'd dig them out.
I don't blame you, to be honest, because
I'd dig them out and reread them. And so you think, I'm not giving in at this point. You know, if somebody can't speak to me face to face or discuss and debate with the rights and wrongs of any decision I've made, don't send things that my wife opens up that are a threat against my business.
It's a coward, isn't it?
And you know, I've got the police involved and stuff. And that was you know, these are tough times. We're not doing well. We're behind the cosh on the money. The team's sort of slowly coming together, and Stanky deserves quite a bit of praise. Yeah. I think touching on this getting a winning culture, one of the first things that happened to John, and it was one of the things that started the process of changing the culture of the club, was one of the first times he met some fans, and we were sort of walking down and one of, you know, good luck. I'm, you know, pleased to see you involved, John. Good luck. I'm not bothered if we win or lose, just as long as the lads try. Yeah. And John were polite, and we walked off. And John turned to me and says, "I'm not bothered as long as we win."
Yeah.
And it was that St. Helens mentality of, it's about winning. It's not about, you know, gallant losers don't get any medals, do they?
No.
So it was that. Then with one of the first sort of things, and and John did remarkably well. He had a good first season. The season after, he did even better. We were within 15 minutes of reaching the final, and that would be, so yeah, 2011, we reached the semi-final. But you know, going back to the 120 grand deficit that we had, we turned it around. We broke even. We turned that loss around and broke even. So we started to rebuild the club, you know, and it was very much piece by piece.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was an interesting couple of years. And like I said, we got to the semi-final. We were leading with about 15 minutes to go. There was some, to be honest, one of the players had you know, that night before had misbehaved, so we wasn't selected. And you could argue, if he'd have been around, we may have won that game, but we didn't. I think it was that getting so near and getting so far. And I think one of the other things as well that certainly you can see affects people, players and coaching staff, and anybody really. If your home life isn't right, nothing's right. And John, he was still a relatively young man, and he'd injured his shoulder. In a game, a Wigan player had lifted a knee, like an illegal move, and smashed his shoulder. So he had to drop out. He had the reconstruction. He came back, and it just give again. So he was a young man. He'd had some bad advice on business dealing. So he was in things sort of built up on him a little bit, and you could see that them affected him. And so after the third season, we sort of tried to get him involved on the commercial business, but it didn't really work out for him. And he sort of moved on. And to be honest, if you have a look, he set up his mum was involved in a really tragic road accident and sadly died. And John set up a foundation, and he's doing some really good stuff in Widnes, raising money for different teams and different charitable stuff. So yeah. So Stanky sowed that seed and it was that conversation.
Yeah.
And it was after John had left, and we were looking around for a new coach. He gave me a call, and there was a thing called dual reg, where you could partner with a Super League team, and most of the other teams had done it. We hadn't done it at the time. And John said, Saints are interested in a conversation. Would you be interested? So, yeah, absolutely. We'll have a chat with them and see what they got to offer. So I went to see Mike Rush, who's the CEO of St. Helens. Yeah. And what you got, because obviously we spent a bit of time together, and we were walking around, Langtree Park, and other people were knocking about. So during the conversation we had of walking about, other people would come up and say, Mike, what about this, that, and the other? Mm. But you could see in every conversation, it was about winning, how to create the win. Whether that was how to sell more pies, or how to get the team kit better, so everything was about the win, and that was a really good. That was, you could see the mentality there, and sort of just going back to that semi-final where we lost in the last 15 minutes, and this was sort of the thing that where they mentioned of the I'm not bothered if we win or lose, let's try. Moment. The thing that sort of put the final nail in the head that we didn't have a winning culture was we'd lost. And genuine, I was sat there, on my seat, head in my hands, and a supporter come up behind me and, bad luck, Mark, hard luck. But he says, that's Hornets. They always let you down. Oh. And it was almost like that was acceptable. And you know what? It wasn't acceptable. So that's when we, it's just these things that we needed to change the culture of the place, and make it about winning rugby league matches, and not be everybody's favourite second team because they beat us.
Yeah.
So that's when we made the link with Saints, and it wasn't popular in a lot of quarters. We got a lot of stick for it. We when we spoke to Saints, and it became clear. What they said was we could train at St. Helens as part of the deal, and we'd always struggled with training facilities in Rochdale. Yeah. You could get a 3G pitch, but you only had it 7-8, and then sometimes you only got on at 7:05 because the under sevens had been practicing, and then and there was another team hanging about, and it was stuff like that, and going inside and outside in winter. But they offered us the use of the St. Helens training facility. And St. Helens are a champion side. Yeah. They're a champion side because they get everything right. And so they had a full-size 3G pitch, which we could have for as long as we wanted, as often as we wanted, access to grass pitches, an indoor gym, which, like Pure Gym.
Oh, is this down near the school? Is it near the school?
Cowley School.
Yeah, I was there in January. Hell of a facility, that.
Yeah, so video rooms, physio rooms, all that part of it, and we said we would get some St. Helens players as well to supplement our guys.
Oh,
And so we said, you know, the thought process was, if we're getting Saints guys, we need to know the Saints systems. And then a conversation came about with Ian Talbot, who was one of the assistant coaches at Saints. And he was interested in the job. And then it sort of just made real good sense to bring Ian along and get some of that winning mentality. Because he was part of that structure. So yeah, we got Ian as the head coach. Like I said, there was a lot of people who thought it was a bad idea and we shouldn't have gone to Saints on one thing and another.
There's always going to be that, unfortunately, isn't it?
Yeah, and the bottom line is, you know, we were a board, so it was a board decision. But I'll be honest, I drove the idea, and you've got to sometimes make decisions and not worry. You know, nobody wants to be unpopular.
Yeah.
But if you believe it to be the right decision, you make that right decision. So that's where we got to. That was a stanky period. Like I said, we'd done all right, and one of the other things we'd been hit and miss with our appointments at CEO. So understanding what was required from a CEO. So sometimes we made the right choice, and when we made the right choice, they progressed up the ladder, if you will.
Yeah.
Sometimes it wasn't as good a choice as that. And then I had worked with a chap called Ryan Bradley. He worked at Link for Life. He was a Rugby League fan. I'd done a lot of stuff with the Rochdale Swarm. We developed we had an international tag festival, so we'd got like nearly 30 teams playing tag rugby league, which was a mixed gender, so men and women in the same team. We had teams from France, Ireland, Wales, all over the UK, London.
That's good, that.
We had Kiwi expats team. So we'd built up this thing, and working with Ryan, we sort of got it to a good place.
Yeah.
And he was so we appointed Ryan, and to be honest, that was one of the best things we ever did, because me and him, we still get on, we're still friends. We speak, most weeks, and pre-lockdown we go out for drinks and everything. And we had a really good relationship, and it was almost it was almost competitive, our relationship as well.
Okay.
In that I'd have an idea, and Ryan would say, "Well, but I think I can improve that," and then vice versa.
Yeah, that's what you want, isn't it? You want to sort of be able to develop each other, which is great.
Yeah. So we got we did some really good stuff, and he had some really early successes with a funding bid for our heritage. The thing is, I'm a Hornets fan, and I love the history of the club. So we got the museum, we got people involved to do the heritage numbers. We created the heroes of Hornets to look back, and one of the things that I'd sort of identified this before Ryan got along, but I'm absolutely honest, and Ryan will tell you the same story. There was only me and him believed in the Fiji project at the start, that we could get the RFL to go with it. And the RFL said they were looking for venues to put forward for a game, but you couldn't specify a game.
Yeah.
So we said, actually, we waited for the groups to come out, and the group was England, Australia, Fiji, and Ireland. And we made the assumption that we wouldn't get either of the big two. So we wouldn't get an England or Australia match.
Yeah.
But we knew we wanted a Fiji match, and like I say, you've had Rats on. And he tells it, his Fijian background. So we said we want the Fiji v Ireland game, and like I say, they said you couldn't really do that. But I met the World Cup organisers at different events, but they were sort of pleased that we'd gone in for it. But like I said, we were trying to get people involved. Initially, the council were a little bit lukewarm, but they sort of come around, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Some other people weren't, and they was telling us you won't even get 1,000 people to come to that particular match. And so that was the beginning of 2013. So Ryan had been recruited. We'd done a lot of stuff on the history. We basically knew we were going to get the Fiji match. We'd done the link with Saints, and we'd got Ian Talbot in as coach. So we set off pretty well, if I'm honest, that particular season.
Yeah.
And then we had a bit of a sticky patch in the middle, and all the things where people were saying, you shouldn't have gone with Saints, you shouldn't have appointed Ian Talbot, you shouldn't have done this. you know, you do have doubts. You do have doubts about the choices that you make. But I remember the lowest point we played Hemel Stags away, and we lost. And there was we had a reserve team, and the reserve team had sort of gone home on the bus, but that meant the supporters, they'd gone home on the supporters bus, which meant that the supporters who had gone to the game were stranded at the game.
Oh no!
So we got beat. There was this muck up with the coach, and it was like a 5-hour, 4-hour journey or whatever back from Hemel on a bus with fans who were upset because we'd lost and upset because the bus had gone without them and what have you. But I remember the and people, one of the criticisms that was sometimes levelled at Ian was he was very much a methodical coach. He was a thinker. He wasn't a ranter and tanter.
Yeah.
He was methodical. So if somebody had missed a tackle or dropped a pass or something, it wasn't a rant at them not trying. It was a dissection of what was wrong with their technique, on why they'd missed that tackle, why they were in, the feet were in, that sort of coach. And so that was the sort of low point. But what we'd sort of been saying for a few years was we hadn't won a trophy in, when we first took over, it was 80 odd years. So by 2013, it was 91 years since we hadn't won a cup. And one of the, like I said, 2013, sort of a lot of the things started to come together, and we revisited the kit. So we each year a kit designer will bring you designs, and sort of say, what do you think of this? And it's okay. But we sort of, I'd sort of always had this thing of Hornets winning the trophy in 1922, and there's this random story that we played in a kit, and if you look back at the trophy, then it's white, red, white, blue, white, red, white, blue. So alternate, predominantly white, but then, like I said, white, red, white, blue, white, red, white, blue. So I said, we want this kit, and this was Stanky was still involved, and he knew some kit manufacturers. So they came back with this kit. So we played the 2013 season in the same kit as the 1922 cup winning team. Yeah. But the other thing was, they played in 1922. They didn't wear it that sequence thing of white, red, white, blue again until we wore it again in 2013. And so we'd had, like I say, we'd had this bad patch. We had a good start, bad patch in the middle. But things had started to go our way. We'd started to win some games. We got the nod that we would host Fiji in 2013. We then we played London Scholars in effect the quarterfinals of the playoffs. We wouldn't win the league. North Wales won it that year, but you could still get to the playoff final and play for a final. We played London Scholars, who that season had a really good side, and we were just. It was nip and tuck at half time, but Jim Stringer, the chap I told you about.
Oh yeah.
He ran the DJ box as well,
Oh yeah.
And he played "Don't Stop Believing" by Journey.
Ah.
And I remember that, what I mean, one of those things that sticks in your mind.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to him since, and he doesn't recollect playing it. It was just a song that he put on. But it was that at halftime, "Don't Stop Believing," and we came back and we won the match. And then with a few minutes to go, Scholars made a bit of a break, and Gaz Lange was our winger. He got stood up a little bit by their winger, stuck his arm out, and basically nearly took this guy's head off. And you thought, they're on our line. We're lucky not to get the chap sent off.
Oh yeah.
And you don't want this to be the moment that Hornets always let you down. Do you get me?
No.
But we held on and won that particular match. And I remember the chairman of the Scholars going balmy that Gaz Langley got sent off. And this is in the dressing room area. But anyway, so I think it was the week after then we the semi-final. We played Oldham at Oldham in in really bad conditions. It was quite bad. But we had this thing then that it's 91 years, and it got into the team, and the team was actually speaking about this, that it was 91 years. We'd also, which wasn't really mentioned at the time, was we had the longest gap in professional rugby league of reaching a final. So it was 22 years since Hornets had even been in a final, never mind lifted a trophy. And that was the longest gap in professional rugby league. And it was a tough, hard game at Oldham. I think we were winning by 2 or something. And then we sort of pushed up the field, and our standoff, Paul Crook, who was captain, pulled the drop goal over, and that was like we had a bit of breathing space, or it felt like it. But the clock was slow ticking, and eventually the hooter went, and I remember thinking, "Geez, we're in a final here."
Yes.
But because we'd got to we'd never progressed this far down the sort of chart, and this one of these odd things. It coincided, the final, around the time of my 25th wedding anniversary.
Oh, brilliant.
For 2 years, we'd had a road trip to drive Route 66 booked. So I didn't actually get to go to the final. So we'd reached our first final in 22 years. We'd not won a trophy in 91 years. And I was driving Route 66 at the time. But I subscribed to, it was Premier TV, I think, at the time. And they said, "Oh, yeah, you'll be able to watch it in America." But when I got there, it said, "You can't watch, this isn't licensed for this zone."
Oh, no.
So we took it the day of the match, or the night of the match. Well, the match was in the day, but obviously it was nighttime in America.
Yeah.
We diverted to Las Vegas. So we were actually in Las Vegas. So something like 5 a.m, I was up. And I took my laptop. So this laptop we're actually speaking on now.
Yeah.
I took that, and I had to search for a dodgy feed for the match, and so I found one. But the only ones that were showing it, genuinely, in the middle of the screen, had an advert for pornography.
Oh no.
And I couldn't get rid of this thing in the middle of the screen. So me and the wife watched the match in this room in a condo in Las Vegas at 5 a.m. with this advert in the middle. And I've watched that match back subsequently. Oh, I don't know, probably more than I've ever watched any match. So I'm talking a lot. I'm not probably best not to have counted.
It's amazing that dodgy advert from the
but that wasn't I taped it at home. So we'd come back, and you watch it back now, and the lads absolutely ran themselves to water, and that's what won us the game. They kept fighting, even though we went behind it for a period. They kept fighting, and Toll had he got we had all the component parts we got right. So we presented the lads with matched, embroidered polos specific to the match. We'd had the kit embroidered with the final. So, it's very much you were in a final. A chap called Ray Myers, who sadly passed away now, and he's got the nickname Mr. Hornet. He presented the lads with the polos and those who were playing and stuff.
Yeah.
And we just got it right. We just got everything right, and we beat Oldham. In the end, it was something like 26-22 or 28-22 or something like that.
Yeah.
I can't remember the exact score leading up to the final. And Oldham broke away, and we scrambled in defence, and they knocked on, and we had a scrum. And Carl Foster, who would later on, after my time, became for a period coach, broke from the scrum, danced across. Fez Gaz Langley, the chap I told you, nearly took the other guy's head off. He stepped inside somebody. The fullback come to him, and he slipped it inside to Wayne English. He was captain, I think, on the day. Well, joint captain on the day, and his nickname was the Bolt from Kirkall. And he scored the winning try. So that with 30 odd, we beat them by about 8 in the end. We were I forget the score now. And so the guys lifted the trophy. and we had a song, Ready, Ready, that we'd actually stolen from Penrith Panthers, if I'm honest. So, and the guys used to sing this whenever they'd won, and it managed to still be on the camera, the TV show when they were singing that song. And so then I was on, me and the wife, in Las Vegas. We were with some friends, and so we drove then that day from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. It took us forever because it was just miles. Well, on the grand scheme, it wasn't that mad, but because we're on Route 66, it wasn't a motorway, so it was slow.
Yeah.
And then we went out for a drink that night. And we'd had a couple, and I was like a bit tired because I'd been up from 5 a.m. And the wife said, "There's a bar called Barney's Beanery, and it used to be a haunt of Jim Morrison, who was the lead singer of the Doors back in the day." Yeah. So we said, "Oh, we'll go there." And for some reason, it sort of re-energized us all. And I'd already had a few, and we still got the bar tab, and just in there, I drank 8 pints, which I'm not a big drinker. And oh my goodness, yeah. So that was a really good thing to do. And then when we came back, we sort of had the Fiji game. I know I've rambled a little bit there, Chris.
No, mate, it's fantastic, Mark, listening to the passion and and the stories. The story sort of tells itself, which is absolutely brilliant. And because I think it's really important that people do understand, how the effect it has on people such as yourself, and and a lot of people will relate to this, which is absolutely brilliant. So it's
to wrap up the 2013 season. We had the Fiji match at Hornets, and it was a sellout. And Pietro Sivanasiva, who was the Fiji captain, came and did a presentation before the game. And one of the original Fijians in Rochdale, Drewy, they got up and they had a hug. And it was just fantastic. And it was, like I said, this sellout crowd. Fiji won on a bit of a wet Monday night, but it didn't really matter the weather. It was just a really good time, and we sort of kept in contact with Fiji. They had been in to sort of jump back a little bit. They had been in touch prior to arriving, saying we want to play Hornets for a warm up.
Okay.
We said yeah, but to be honest, a lot of the lads, because the season had finished, had gone on holiday, so we scratched together a bit of a side. And to be honest, they give us a drubbing, 72 something. But they sat, like they talk of the haka and things, what a lot of the Islander teams do. The Fijians sing a hymn, the Fijian Rugby League team, they sing a hymn, and it's like, geez, it's just the most incredible thing. And it was just, we sort of were in like the perfect zone at that time, and we got made Freeman of the Borough. So we got the club was made. Got freedom of the borough, and we got a presentation at the town hall, and we had a reception for the Fijians as well at same time. So it was just, that was a really good time.
That is absolutely brilliant, and the Fijians are such fantastic people to be around, because they're so positive, and the positivity, they look after each other. I think when talking about the word team, I've never met a culture so team orientated as I have with Fijians. Like in my army days, we'd go and play rugby, and lo and behold, it was quite amusing, because I remember a chef, one of our chefs, you'd never do like personal training or the physical fitness side of it, but as soon as a game of rugby came along, I'm available. And that was it. It was straight down to play the game and everything like that. And they bought a really, really good community. But then, because they're so passionate about the game, they bought a guy up from Leicester, Saru Rabini, and I think he was a Fijian Rugby Union captain at the time. And he came up and watched the team playing and everything like that. And it just shows that when you've got that community together and the positivity there, it's brilliant. So I suppose that was really the start of your when we talk about the mentality stuff, that was the start of the winning feeling, Mark, wasn't it? Really? So
and
of course you went on to Toulouse and
So it was just staying on the Fijian thing. I remember we'd Ryan had stimulated some conversation with a couple of the players, and we had one lad in mind, who would agree to come and play for us. And the semi-final of the World Cup, so it was England versus New Zealand, and then it was Fiji v Australia, and it was the best and worst rugby league match I've ever seen. In that England versus Australia, New Zealand was just the best game until the last 5 seconds, and Sean Johnson stepped the English defence and scored the winning try after, and we'd been leading for all the game. So then it was a double header. So literally, I sat through the Fiji-Australia semi-final, and Fiji got a bit of a touch-up, if I'm honest. Australia were far too good. So then I said, I'm going to try and get hold of the player that we were speaking to. And I thought, the opportunity's missed. So I'm walking out the thing. And then somebody from the Rugby League, I can't remember who it was. And so I said, we're looking to speak to, what's his name? Escapes me, one of the Fijian players. He says, I'll take you downstairs. So we went into the bowels of Wembley, into the dressing room. We never actually went in because it was a closed environment, but like the players' tunnel area. And that was a bit of an event. So we recruited the player and signed him up, and so everything was that. The 2013 was like just the most magical year, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that is absolutely brilliant, and for so much to happen in that 1 year, it's I suppose with that, looking at it, Mark, it's testament to what you and the team have done. When you were there, considering the amount of hardship that the club was in at the time, and the amount of hurdles you had to overcome, and that just that does pay testament to the work that you put in behind the scenes. So I'm sure any Hornets fans listening to this will just want to say thank you for your time, for building that, and and for your efforts at the time. It is a phenomenal achievement, and one I'm sure you're very, very proud of.
Yeah, I think I'd always set myself, and I think this is a thing about winning, is to set yourself goals, and the goal was for Hornets to be a sustainable championship team. So that meant we had to be in the championship, and basically we weren't bankrupt, if you get me.
Yeah.
So that was, in effect, that was the goal. That was always the goal. So we'd had this stellar year in 2013, and then obviously got promoted for the 2014 season. And this is where we got a bit of a curveball, in that they changed the rules of promotion and relegation for that year, in that I think it was the bottom 5 would be relegated instead of the bottom 2.
Was this for?
We entered a season where we would have, in effect, nearly make the play. We would have had to sort of make the playoffs, or you either made the playoffs or you were relegated. So for us to go into championship in 2014, to avoid relegation and make the playoffs, was just too big of a task. So we had a good start, and then because we had a relatively small squad, injuries kicked in and one thing and another. And it is, looking back, we finished 3rd bottom. So in any other season, we'd have stayed up.
Yeah.
And like I said, we'd done it within budget and stuff. And there's a good chance if we'd have stayed up, I'd have stood down then, because I'd have attained the goal that I wanted.
Yeah.
We'd won some silverware. We were a sustainable championship club. That by sustaining meant we'd been in championship and stayed there for, So that was always my goal. And so into 2015, we were relegated back to League One. And I think there is an element of when a coach has done, a coach always probably does the more successful work in the first season. I think if you look, there's some stats that sort of tell you that. So by the end of year 3, Ian was offered a chance in a more secure role at Saint, sort of involved with, they're almost, full time, if you will. And so, you put yourself in Ian's shoes. Do you stay the coach of Rochdale Hornets, and any coach, you're 4 games away from the sack?
Yeah.
Or do you go full time and work with Saints, who've looked after you all that time and looked after us as well?
Yeah.
So Ian said, I've enjoyed my time, and I, still now and again I'll speak to Ian. And that's one of the things I'm really fortunate with. That I still could speak to Stanky if I wanted to. I could speak to Ian, and Alan, who's the next coach. So he stood down, and then we went again. Let's look at a new coach.
So when it comes to recruiting coaching staff, obviously Championship clubs haven't got the same sort of budget as a Super League club, for example. How does the process work? Is it a case of, because I know obviously earlier you touched upon advertising the post, but is it a case of, is it like an internal opportunity? So, for example, you go to the RFL, you say to the RFL, can you just circulate the fact that we're recruiting a new coach? Or is it a case of you've got a rough idea of who you want, and you approach the club, for example, to take the coach away, or how does it work?
Well, there is a process. So, and going back to that, when Darren Shaw left the club at the end of the 2009 season, it'd be, and we got very few applications. We advertised, we got very few applications. By the time Stanky left, people applied before it was advertised. So you could see how the currency of the club had risen. And then we went to advert, and we got a good selection of coaches. And like I said, we picked Ian. By the time Ian left, we were sort of inundated with coaching applications. But again, because people could see it was a good club to be involved with.
Yeah.
So we had some good coaches and some high-profile names and some high-profile players. But we did the interview, and Alan absolutely stood out in that he wasn't a big name player. Most people had never heard of him. He coached at assistant level at Warrington. He'd been in the England like junior setup, so he'd got some rep experience. He'd, off his own bat, he decided he wanted to be a first team coach, not a reserve or a rep coach. Yeah. So he got a gig in Australia in a place called Serena, and Serena's like the back of the Ons, makes Cumbria look like the M62.
Does it?
Yeah. So
wow.
He'd been at Serena for 3 years, and they'd been cellar dwellers, and he got them to minor premiers and grand finalists. So,
wow.
So he had a fantastic background. But Alan's very much a winner. You know what I mean? And sometimes people can be over focused on it, becomes almost an obsession. And if Alan has a flaw, possibly that he's so, that's the entire thing he's focused on.
He's a very focused guy, isn't he? He knows what he wants, and he'll get it. Yeah.
So we took him on, and again we got a bit of stick because he wasn't a name. Nobody had heard of him. Nobody had heard of Serena. Although, to be honest, what he had done at Serena, he'd gone to coach at the Mackay Cutters, which is the equivalent in standard, probably mid to lower end Super League. He'd done some stuff at the Cowboys, North Queensland Cowboys, which is like above and beyond Super League. So he had all the component parts. One of the things at this level, and it's something I learned to do, was ask the coach where he's going to get his players from. We will have a cohort of players, but every coach has a group that follow him around. Yeah. And so he had Ben Moores, who's still with the club, Trigger, who was centre, Gav Benyon. So players who he coached in Oz were part of his cohort, and a lot of people hadn't heard of them, but they'd done really well in Australia, sort of under the radar. So he said, I've got these players, and then I've got local lads who I've worked with at Warrington. I know, with me being in the England setup, I know lads who've gone through academy and haven't quite made it onto Super League, but I know that they're good players.
Yeah.
And we already had, some good players at the club. So Wayne English, Paul Crook, people like that. So that was 2016, which was Killer's first year. So again, we got a bit of stick. It wasn't. People liked a name, and you still see it, that they'll assume a good player makes a good coach, and geez, they don't.
No.
They may do. They may do. You know, somebody like Malcolm Reilly, makes a good coach, but a lot of them don't. And they assume that the coach will transfer his skill into the other players, and it doesn't work like that. So that was 2016. So sort of we were in a league of 12. We were the 9th favourite at the start of the year, and we sort of just got off like a house on fire. We were just demolishing teams, and it flicked between us and Toulouse at the top of the league, and we sort of looked at the Toulouse game, which was on the horizon.
Yeah.
But we knew it was like going to be the big game, and Toulouse hadn't been tested, and they were going to come to Scotland and play us. And so Ryan said, "I've had this guy on to me about doing a billboard. Would you be interested in having what do you think about having a billboard?" And you're like, you know what? That'd be good. Let's have a look at the cost and stuff.
Yeah.
And at the same time, this has dragged on, is that the old club had been part owners with the football club in the stadium. And when they took a loan with the RFL and used their shares in the stadium as collateral to the RFL. So when the old club went boom, the RFL landed with half a stadium that was like £500,000 in debt. So it wasn't the best thing. So they didn't really want these shares, and we were paying an astronomical rent to play there. They sort of had us over a barrel when we first came back.
Yeah.
And so the RFL said, if we can negotiate a deal where your rent is at a reasonable level for guaranteed for 25 years, we get some of the money that's owed to us by the old administration back, and the football club get the shares. Are you happy with that? So we said, yeah, but we took it to supporters and explained that, and said, this is, what's on offer, and people agreed. So that was around 2016. So part of it was, in all these things, there's some noises off, you've sold your soul, you're never going to come back. Yeah. So we thought, what's the best thing we can do is to put on a show against Toulouse. So we bought billboard advertising. So a couple of billboards, and I'm talking huge things. So the one, if you go on Mellor Street, it was one of those, and one that's near Howarth Timber, Noel Clegg's motorcycle.
Oh, see, yeah, I know which one you mean.
So they were huge for advertising the match, and Luke Harrison, whose daddy used to play rugby with, had got involved, and he's a graphic designer, and he designed these posters. So it sent a message out. We were here, and we were going to make a statement. And so Toulouse came undefeated, and like I said, they demolished everybody. So it was a cracker of a match, but it was brutal, and they got dirty, and I think there was a bite. One of them bit one of our players, and for all that rugby league's rough and tumble, some things that are not allowed, and biting's one of the things. Yeah. And it ended up, I think it ended up 26-all full time. So we drew with this mighty Toulouse team. And it was in the players' tunnel. It didn't kick off, but there was acrimony.
Yeah.
And we sort of, and I think it may have been Alan. I think it was Alan come up with the phrase of siege mentality. That to beat these guys, we had to have a siege mentality. That it was us v the world. It was us versus the RFL versus every other team. For us to beat Toulouse. And so we went. We sort of, I think all the effort we put into that game knocked us off our stride in some of the other games after that, and we lost a few, and we went off the track a little bit, and then we went over to Toulouse in a league game, and they hammered us. We took a bit of a scratch squad, if I'm honest, but they hammered us. Yeah. And then we sort of dusted ourselves off. We won a fairly straightforward, and I can't remember who it was against, for the early playoff to go to the final.
Yeah.
So we had to travel to Toulouse in the final. and it was the end of, it was the last match of the season. As long as we won, it was the last match of the season. And we were busted by that time. So John O'Smith, who was our best strike player, his knee was acting up. Rats, he had a abdominal injury, and to be honest, he never played after that game for like a season or so.
Yeah.
There were people carrying knocks, bumps, and bruises. So we beat Toulouse. We won on the Sunday, and then it was confirmed on the Monday that we were in the final. But we had to fly out on the Thursday. So in reality, you had Tuesday and Wednesday to get ready, book time off work and everything. And so we drove down to Gatwick. I think it may have even been Wednesday night, and flew on the Thursday to Toulouse, and then we got put up in an out-of-town hotel.
Yeah, wow. And
then we went to Toulouse's old ground for a captain's run, if you will.
Yeah.
And I remember we were all worried about John O'Smith's knee, and he gave way in the captain's run the night before the match.
Oh, no.
I don't think Rats even took part so much because his gut was aching. There were people just hobbling around, and we think...
two big players for the club as well, weren't they?
Yeah, and they weren't just them. There were other players with knocks and bumps and bruises. Dave Cookson, who was the centre, because he couldn't get the time off work to come with us on the Thursday, and I think he flew in on either the Friday night or the Saturday morning, so he missed. So it was all a bit of a mismatch. Are you thinking we'd got this siege mentality, but we were busted as a team
quite hard.
So we went back to the hotel, and Alan put on a film, the Kids of '92, and it told the story of
was it Beckham?
How they got made United into world beaters at the time, weren't they? So he did that, and then he sort of, and it was interesting. I was there, and it went round every player, and every player Killer got them to say what it would mean to winning. And it sort of, and I'm a fan, so I'm like getting a bit worked up by this. And then the last person at the table was me.
Cool.
And so they asked me to explain. Well, it was just, at the time, I was a bit embarrassed because I got upset about it,
Yeah.
And I sort of had no
passion, isn't it? It takes over.
And then you think, I wonder, you don't think it's made any difference. But then Luke, who I said did the graphics, interviewed Dale Bloomfield a couple of weeks back, and Dale brought up that speech, and you think, well, actually, if I've contributed one little bit, I can take that, so the Killer come up with this game plan. What we would do, we knew that the dressing sheds at Toulouse were small and hot, and they'd muck us about.
Yeah.
That we would get ready, completely ready, stripped and changed at the hotel. So we didn't leave. We by the rules of the RFL, you have to be at the ground. It's something like half an hour before the match or something like that. But have a representative there, like an hour or so. So Luke had got sent on in advance to the game. But the team, myself and Killer and the backroom staff, stayed at the hotel and got dressed. And we arrived like seconds before the deadline. And the match commissioner was thinking we weren't even bothering turning up. Everybody was getting a bit anxious, and you're thinking we sort of Killer had done it just to wind them up. But we knew it was happening, but they didn't. So there was that sort of level of anxiety. And then obviously the game kicked off, and they come at us like a whirlwind, and we held on for a bit, and then they sort of broke us down, I think, with three or more quick tries, and it was 16-0 with about half an hour gone, and with the best will in the world, playing away in front of 4,000 or 5,000 Toulouse fans. We had one fan who'd been able to make it because you couldn't get a direct flight to Toulouse. It cost Jim, the chap I mentioned, so he comes back in the story. I think it cost him $1,000 plus. Hopefully his missus isn't listening to this to get there. And so yeah, we were 16-0 down, and then Rats comes into the story again.
Yeah.
Dave Cookson, the chap who couldn't get a flight out with us, got a heavy tackle and had to go off for a concussion test and failed the concussion test. So couldn't come back on. So we were down to 3 subs with a busted team. So Rats had to go on because he was the only back substitute we had, and he was carrying a gut injury, like this abdominal injury. I think so. His first action in the game was to basically punch a Toulouse player.
Was it? I didn't think that about, to be fair.
That was his first action in the game, coming on as a sub, and we were 16-0 down. And I'm thinking, geez, Rats, do we? I don't think that's the best idea. But
brilliant.
And looking back, I think it had an effect in that, one, it showed Toulouse, if you're going to win, you're going to cop a little bit along the way.
Of course, yeah.
And 2, that there was a bit of fight in us. And all of a sudden, we sort of rallied. They'd got the penalty, but when we rallied, and we sort of drove up down the middle of the park, and we had been practicing this move, and we shipped it out to the right, and Rats was involved in this quick hands to the winger who went in. So Paul Crook had his super kicking boots on that day and banged it right between the sticks. So it made it 16-6. Couple of minutes before, like a minute before half time, we got a penalty in front of the sticks. Rookie knocked that over, so it was 16-8. So we were in the game, and that's all we'd ever spoke about. As long as we were in the game, we were all right. And then in the second half, it was nip and tuck. They're a good side, but we were we were the best we'd been, even with busted. Jono were causing him a load of grief, and he eventually got sin binned.
Believe that.
For gobbing off and stuff. But we still carried on pushing. And I can't remember the exact sequence of this, but it was Danny Yates danced through and real good footwork.
Yeah.
And we scored. So all of a sudden, I can't remember if that was the first try, or we did a cross kick, which Rats caught, out jumped the defender, landed on the ground and passed it off the ground to the wing who scored. And all of a sudden, from being 16-0, then 16-6, 16-8, we'd sort of, we were in front. We were in front at this point. And it was like, just unbelievable. You're thinking, well, it's proper Roy of the Rovers stuff. And then, I know you mentioned Chris Riley. Chris Riley got the ball, and there was nothing on. There was just nothing on. And he just ran at the defenders slightly on an arcing angle, and then rotated just on impact and slipped out of 2 of the grasps and went over. And that was it. We were 2 scores in front.
Yeah.
And then just literally they threw everything at us, and we held on. And then with, I think, a minute 40 to go, something like that, they broke us, and then they spun it out to the right, our left, and we just run out of cover, and they went in on the corner. And then Carilla, who was one of their star players, kicked the conversion from the touchline, and they had the clock, the actual match clock ticking down on the edge, and we had to kick off to them with 40 seconds to go, and we were 2 points in front. And if they scored, it was all up, and they threw it, and it was like hot potato stuff.
Yeah.
So they spun it out to the wing, and he actually broke through the line, and at that point, and I said it before, we almost reverted to an under sevens side. If you ever watch under sevens, everybody chases the ball. Well, everybody chased this chap down, and sort of surrounded him, and he panicked a little bit and dropped the ball, and sort of one of those fumbled it, and we picked it up, and so we literally ran on the pitch at that point.
Yeah.
But the ref gave us a penalty because he'd fumbled it, and their guy had picked it up in front of him, so he was offside. So the rules, we sort of ran on, and then sort of, like, slightly embarrassed walked off. we kicked the ball into touch. You have to take the first tap, and I think we tapped it and kicked it again off the pitch. The hooter went, and we were back on we were back on the medal. Like I said, when I spoke to the players before, and I spoke, if you think right back to the start, I said my dad took me.
Yeah.
That's what I've mentioned, and it was like just the euphoria of that, and you know, like we were like, say, 20 odd people and one fan in the stand, and we'd won. And Ben Moore's come up to me, and he didn't speak for a minute, and we were just like hugging, and he said, "That's for your dad." You think, oh God, Ben!
Wow.
So
that's a nice touch. That's a really, really nice touch, and that just proves the positive impact of a good team, determination, and the never say die attitude, doesn't it?
And like Ben, he's a great player, and he was injured last year, and I was so chuffed when they signed him again this year.
Yeah,
because you know he's a good lad, and Chris, you know, and Chris Riley was another, you know, sort of similar sort of tact, and and you can't that bit, you know, you can't relive that moment, and you'll never relive it. And I suppose it sort of was that, you know, we were nearly at the stage where I said about getting promoted and then staying in the league. And so into 2017, we'd assembled a really good side, and we got off to a flyer, and we won the first two. We beat Bradford for the first time ever at Bradford in 50 odd years. You know, we demolished Dewsbury, and then Hull KR had come down, and they'd won their first two, and we'd won out. So we were first and second in the league, and we took Hull KR to the wire, and we just slipped up on that, and that would have been, you know, incredible. And then we had a really good win away at Featherstone, and then we went through a real bad spell of 10 matches of losses. And we played Oldham at the Summer Bash, and we took Oldham were beaten, and it was a ridiculous, something like 22-4, or, you know, really hammering us. And all of a sudden we turned it around, and we sort of come back, and I've got that one on tape because it was on Sky, and we beat, you know, we hammered them in the end, and that turned that season around, and we got enough points, and we ended up finishing 9th in the season, which was really a good achievement. So we'd got promoted, we'd got into the championship, and at the time the money was looking okay. Yeah. And then we got a real kick in the shins when 2 of our sponsors went bankrupt. So the main shirt sponsor and we had a ticketing offer sponsor, so they went bump. And that really threw a real spanner in the works. Because what my plan was, I was going to step down at the end of the season. I'd achieved everything I possibly wanted to achieve. But if I'd have walked away at that point, it looks, you know, the club's in money trouble and you've walked off. Yeah. So we had to do a lot of stuff to try and get the club stabilised. You know, tell players that what we'd agreed to pay them, we weren't going to be able to pay them now. You know, stuff like that, which is really difficult conversation. And so we sort of, that was 2018. I was still the chair at 2000, but I thought, right, we've got it stable. I can pass it on now. And so I stood down at what would have been the AGM for the club. So I'd arranged to step down in May, June time. But because there was the accounts were slightly delayed, it was that the AGM, I was bloody on holiday again. So not that, you know, I sound like a jet setter. So my last match, technically in charge, was Swinton, and we won a last-minute victory. There were seconds on the clock, and they played at a set of 6 and went for just a big kick downfield to wind the clock down, and our guy charged it down. Regathered and scored under the post. So it was not a bad end. And in that season, it to be fair, a lot of things didn't go quite right. But we because of I said before about them changing it to 5 getting relegated.
Yeah.
They realigned it again, and I think there was only one team going to be relegated. So we had to win a playoff match to stay up, and we won. We beat Sheffield away. So we'd stayed up. So in reality, the last 7 seasons or so, 6 of them were either in Championship or winning trophies to get there. So it was and then, like I say, since then I've took a bit of a backseat. I've got this thing with All Golds helping them develop a little bit. I'm involved a little bit with the Hornets Foundation. So you've gone the full. We've
got a really, really good. We've got an amazing insight, and you can see why. You can see, Mark, by just by the way you speak about it, your love of the game, the love of the club, and a lot of the guys at Hornets that are there in the past and still there now obviously hold you in a really high regard not just because of the work that you've done, but because of the guy that you generally are. Because you are generally, and I can say this because obviously I know you're generally really nice guy to know that has got a lot of passion and drive, and and that sort of that is a testament to your character, and the fact that All Golds have come in for you now to help build their future, and I'm pretty confident that that you're gonna have some great success there. And I've absolutely loved having you on the show. It's been absolutely brilliant, and there's so many other areas we can talk about, like the work you do with the foundation at Hornets, and what you've done at the foundation of the Hornets, and what you can do now. But I suppose we can save that for another day, because there's just so many areas that we can look on. But in terms of creating that winning mentality and motivations, it's gold dust. It's absolutely gold dust, and and I thank you for sharing that this afternoon. It's been fantastic. But guys that want to sort of find out a bit more about you or to connect with you, then where can they find you?
Well, if they go on to Haywood, Middleton and Rochdale Circle website, you can drop in an email at mark@hmrcircle.org.uk. Happy to have a chat with people there. I'm also involved in a project to help write the 150th anniversary of Hornets. So that's in next year. So 2021 is the 150th anniversary of the club. Yeah. So I'm on a project with that. So so no, it's been a pleasure. It's been good because I hadn't scripted what I was going to say, and I wasn't sure about what you were going to ask. So it was some of those, that I probably could have gone on for several more hours talking about some of the stuff. Absolutely, I want to just as an ending. One of the things I'm really proud of is we set up a women's team and we set up a wheelchair team.
Yeah.
And in that golden year of 2013, the women's team was the first year, and they got to a final. So we didn't do so bad. I'm proud of the legacy that I've left behind. I think Andy, the new chairman's doing a really good job. He's got a great team behind him. He complements the fact that they can use the stuff that we built. So the foundation, the women's and wheelchair team, all the stuff around it. So yeah, so I'm not putting my feet up, but I can look back and say,
it's hard, isn't it? When you love something, you're passionate about something. It is like we've spoken about before the program. It is hard to stay away for too long, isn't it? But
I think the thing is as well is knowing you've only so much energy and so many ideas, and knowing when your time's up. And in reality, I'd probably like to have stood down at the end of the 2017 season rather than part of the 2018 season.
Yeah.
And that would have been, happy days. So, like I say, I'm proud of what we achieved, and obviously not just me, but other people. And I know I always give big raps to Ryan, Bradley, Luke Harrison, Ian Kilshaw, Ian Talbot, John Stankovic, the coaches I work with, and all the other people involved. So happy days.
It's been brilliant. Well, we'll definitely stick the links below. So, guys, if you want to find out more about Mark's journey, about Rochdale Hornets 150th anniversary, we'll stick the links below. Get in touch. And Mark Wynn, thanks very much, and I wish you every success at Gloucester. And it's been fantastic to catch up.
Oh, no, good stuff. Thanks, Chris.